most modern contexts, it's very difficult to separate the positive and negative parts of sexual activity from each other. This difficulty is exacerbated by sexual abuse, placing the capacity to delineate, listen to define, and place sexually in our personal and public lives, as well as find out what our society's responsibilities should be. How do we define abuse? How do we personally handle abuse? How do we publicly handle abuse? Does the source of abuse matter? Before we can even think to give abuse an exact definition, we must recognize this. The impact of sexual abuse on health and society is often not publicly recognized. While law and morality may stand against it, there are few healthy ways to speak on it. Canadian society is no stranger to this communication problem. The start of public communication begins with establishing barriers. The most effective way to establish barriers is to understand who and what factors are involved. So to start with, what is sex? Sex is not just a mechanical means of reproduction. Any insistence on such definition erases the social reality. Sex is an act that begins, proceeds, and ends between two willing partners. Anything outside this definition depends on further context and often no longer describes a healthy shared act. This definition is lacking, as any straight definition would. It ignores who is deciding what willing means. Here, when willing is not defined through a shared process of communication prior to, during, and after, sexual abuse is taking place. Consent is a two-way street. Understanding what your partner wants out of it is important as knowing what you want. Sex is as much a psychological act as it is physical. Understanding this is the point at which you can see why abuse occurs. Because one person feels their own wants should be placed above others. What prompts that attitude up are the social dynamics of playing interaction between those with and those without power in any given situation. It's also why sexual abuse can never be limited to just a mechanical act. If at any point power is used by one partner to control agency of another, abuse is taking place. This is an important point to emphasize. And to do so, we'll first turn to how we can understand this ethically, emotionally, and perceptually. Finally go into how we can use this knowledge we gain for healthy communication. From when we are born, how we see ourselves becomes how we understand ourselves, how we place ourselves amongst our family, our peers, and wider society. Sexuality, understood as part of the personal expression of self, is not something that just appears suddenly. It develops differently for different people. When a sense of self is damaged from negative affirmations or events on the part of a situation or another person, our society is often not willing or able to allow a person the space or support needed to rebuild that sense and express themselves in healthy ways. If we deal with sexual abuse through a purely numerical view, the situation is horrendous and unfavorable for victims. But we also have a responsibility to understand it emotionally and understand and feel empathy for those who are going through sexual abuse, as well as those who are adjacent to those going through sexual abuse. It must be understood that any form of abuse that involves the damaging of one person can lead to the damaging of another person. The sexual abuse, like every other form of abuse, is not usually about a personal relationship or about one person's willingness to abuse the power that they have over another. The responsibility that is placed within the hands of the individual and society to watch and understand that sexual abuse is just as equal to any other form of abuse is evident through how sexual abuse can lead and often does lead to the victim often being hurt more than the perpetrator. What we perceive as right and acceptable often doesn't always align with what is actually right. If we only understand what we can perceive and we stay away from what is actually true, then we will be stuck in a situation where we're unable to deal with accurately and with empathy the situation of those who are both survivors and present victims of sexual abuse. A better understanding, appreciation, development, and expression of everybody's sexual agency is needed in our present society. A good rule of thumb to begin healthy communication is to understand the point at which someone else's agency begins, yours ends. As a person of their own volition allows you to enter that space, it must be considered outside of your own. But it's only a start. The structures that allow for sexual abuse to take place must be dealt with an understanding of why those structures are still standing. What is meant by this is, for example, in the workplace, the hierarchy structure that allows for one person to decide the fate and decide the work rate of another also allows another person to decide the agency of another. This is a dangerous situation for anybody to be placed in, but especially when it comes to sexual abuse, it leads to a situation where an abuse of power is almost inevitable due to the nature of humanity. By increasing our understanding of why sexual abuse takes place and what we can do to prevent it, we'll be able to approach the situation and how the communication can begin and can continue without dismissing the views or the lives of those who are most vulnerable to sexual abuse, those who are the weakest in society, or those who are put at the most disadvantage in society.